Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, The Birdcage. Black feathers. I can't escape. It's... As I awoke shocked from a fitful slumber, I was met with a severe pain in my chest. Brushing my fingertips over the bumps of my ribs, I located an area of extreme tenderness. Carefully, I raised myself from the plush surface of my bed, cradling my injured side. Making my way to the nearest bathroom, I lifted the loose nightshirt that adorned my torso. Staring back at my reflection in the pristine mirror, I found nothing wrong with my chest, not a bruise, not a cut, not a single mark, but still, the intense pain persisted. I could almost pick out a steady rhythm to the pulse-like sensation, and out of the corner of my eye thought I saw a crow. It won't stop. This persisting agony, my attempts at calming myself are moot. Breaths ragged, skin slick and shiny with sweat, my mouth dry. This was too much. I could hardly focus at work. Other people can see it. I'm sure reluctantly, I poked my head into my boss's office, asking with all the strength I could muster a simple, "I need." He only had to glance at me before his head bobbed up and down in and out. "It's fine." It seems the only constant anymore is the radiating pain in the crow. The crow, I began seeing him again and again. He wasn't just a shadow I'd catch in my peripheral vision. In the beginning he may have been, but now I'd see him sitting, perched comfortably on my dresser. At first I was scared, throwing anything I could get my hands on at that ink black bird, attempting to rid myself of him, but nothing worked. The objects just passed through him. He'd stare and moving, occasionally turning his head to the side, looking at me almost questionably. I'm hallucinating. I must be. I'm going crazy. I must be. I can't do this. I can't. This pain, that CROW, this is driving me insane. Stumbling to my small washroom, I once again lifted the hem of my shirt, and as before, there was not a single thing amiss on my pallid skin. But still, the thump, thump, thump continued on. It wasn't always there. You know, sometimes the pain would dissipate, leaving only a soreness. It seems the more distressed I become, the worse it gets. With every rapid beat of my heart, the pain escalates. This needs to stop. I'm suffocating. Surprisingly, I felt not a thing as the sharp blade punctured my chest. I slowly followed the line of my rib, stopping midway, blood spilling out in small rivulets. I set the crimson-stained blade aside, next to that bloody crow, and with shaky hands I poked my finger into the wound. I licked my lips, concentrating as I made it further into my flesh. Pulling it away slightly, the crow squawked. I whipped my head up at breakneck pace, settling my wide eyes on the bird. That was the first time it had ever made a sound since I had begun hallucinating it. As my finger pulled the skin of my chest back further, exposing the bone, the crow squawked again and again. With every tear and feverish scratch, the pain faded. With every rib I exposed, the searing burn receded. I became more frenzied in my actions, until my whole ribcage was bare to see. I touched the white of my bones despite all my missing flesh. I didn't feel scared. Rather, I was intrigued. The smell of iron was thick. The crow's loud noise is oppressive, but I felt a sort of calm. I looked to the puddle of skin and blood and over to the mirror. What I saw staring back horrified me. No, this can't be right. Small, beady black eyes. The crow came closer to me. Since ceasing its squawking, and looked intently at my bare chest. What laid within my chest cavity was a small, jet black bird, a crow. The second story thumps under the bed. It's funny how things work. We have giant metal vehicles that fly through the air. We have HD video that you can carry in your pocket. We have music that can be accessed anytime from devices that use touch screens. But when something like this happens, something so stupid, something so simple, there's nothing to be done, nothing that can be done, even with our advances. I woke up 3 weeks ago in this place. It's a medium-sized room with concrete walls, floor and ceiling. In spots, the concrete is stained and cracked. A single light bulb hangs from the ceiling and sometimes it flickers. It's not a very powerful bulb, but enough to see by. I woke up next to a woman. I didn't recognize her, but that didn't matter. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know how I'd gotten here. There didn't seem to be any doors or windows or openings of any kind. Just a concrete box with me and a sleeping woman in it. I woke her up after a few moments of dazed confusion. She didn't scream, which was my worry, and instead asked questions calmly. "Where are we?" she asked. "I don't know. How did I get here? I don't know. Who are you?" I smiled finally. A question I could answer. "I'm Tom," I said. "Tom Green. I woke up here just a minute ago, and I was hoping you'd have an idea about it. But since you don't, well, we may as well get acquainted. You know my name, what's yours?" I stuck out my hand. She shook my hand. "I'm Melissa," she replied. "Melissa Blythe. Melissa Dobbs. Last I remember, I was." She froze and creased her eyebrows. "Did you hear that?" I listened, but didn't hear anything. I shook my head. "What was it?" I asked. It sounded like, I don't know, a thump. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening for another noise. There was nothing but silence as long as we sat there. After so long, I just shook my head. "I don't think there's anything there, Melissa," I said. "But if you did hear a sound, that means we're close to the surface." "The surface?" she repeated. "What do you mean, the surface?" "Well, the way I figure, we're probably underground. Where else would someone keep a concrete box? Another thing I'm wondering is how they even got us in here. It all seems like a dream, you know." I sighed and leaned my back against the wall. This couldn't be happening. Not really. "I know what you mean," Melissa said. "It just doesn't seem real. This doesn't just happen. This can't just happen." This time I heard the noise, too. It was like a thump, but a squishy thump, like if you hit an animal with a heavy object. Images of bleeding animals flashed in my mind. Pictures of infants being hit with hammers and baseball bats. I almost jumped. I was so surprised. Why would I think that? That wasn't normal. None of this was normal, this place, and that sound and these thoughts. None of this was right. "Did you?" "Yeah. I heard it," I interrupted Melissa. I started to ask if she saw things, but she would think I was crazy. Being here was making me a little stressed. Sure, but crazy? No, and I wouldn't let her think that. Melissa and I spent the rest of the day discussing the situation and listening for the noises. It seems they came at regular intervals, once every 10 minutes or so. I thought maybe we were near an automatic machine sometimes when the sounds came. I would have the flashes of terrible things. It was disgusting and wrong. But it happened. I couldn't help it. I wondered if Melissa had the flashes, but I didn't dare ask her if my only companion thought I was crazy. Well, I didn't think it would end well. We had thought it was some sort of hostage taking at first. We thought we had been taken captive by criminals. That's what we'd decided. It was a normal assumption. About 30 thumps into the day, though, our thoughts changed. We were hungry if the thumps really were coming every 10 minutes. Then 30 thumps meant we'd been awake for 5 hours. I could hear my stomach rolling, and once I even heard Melissa's. We were thirsty more, though my throat was sore and dry, but we had no water or food. We were talking about what we'd do when we got out of this box when it happened. The interviews and books and maybe even movies that would come. We could both get rich off of this. We tried to remain positive like that. Suddenly, everything went black. It felt like only a second, and I didn't realize my eyes had closed until I opened them. Melissa and I woke up at the same time. We were confused. Somehow we'd blacked out at the same time, woken up at the same time. And if food, Melissa whispered, "There's food and water." She was staring into a corner of the room where before there had been nothing. But now there were 2 trays with food and water on them. My stomach crumbled, and I didn't care where they had come from or how we'd blacked out. "Let's eat," I said, grabbing our trays. "We can talk about it in a few thumps." Melissa actually laughed. "Funny how the way we measure time can change just like that," she said, grabbing her food. "But I guess it's just as good as minutes or hours." The food was good warm steak and potatoes, a scoop of ice cream for dessert, a liter bottle of water to drink. The steak was pre-cooked for us, so no knives. The forks we were given were dull, very dull. No way we could hurt anyone with them. Not that we would be able to regardless, since it seemed they could induce loss of consciousness whenever they wanted to. I got the feeling that once we were done eating, we'd just black out again, and the forks and trays would be gone. We ate in silence, and then my guess was confirmed. We lost our trays and our forks, and again, we were just in an empty, concrete box. We never actually talked about it. We kept busy, talking about other things. After another 50 or so thumps, we went to sleep. It was hard at first to sleep with the thumps, but as with anything, you grow accustomed to it. You grow accustomed to the thumps, and the flashes, and the blackouts, just as people grow accustomed to planes and phones and iPods. This is adaptation. This is evolution. I don't know how long we slept, but every day there seemed to be less time in between each thump. Each day, though, the food seemed to get a little better. The first day's food was good, but it seemed bland. Each day the food tasted better, as if a reward for losing time between thumps. This is conditioning. By day 10, there was barely any time between thumps. The food was delicious. We couldn't get enough Melissa, and I got along well enough. We were becoming pretty big friends, and at around day 5 we started having sex. We didn't love each other, but we were both adults. We both wanted something to keep us busy and entertained. Why not sex? Day 12. Day 12, though, things took a turn. They went bad. We were eagerly awaiting lunch. We were ready for the blackout, ready to delight in the delicious food we'd come to expect. We weren't thinking about escape. We weren't thinking about anything. Thumps, food thumps, flashes, food thumps, flashes, food. The flashes had gotten worse. So much worse, the thumps came so fast now. The flashes were in my head all the time. Babies flayed open and dead dogs. Limbs severed and laying in pools of blood. Cats, with their eyes pulled out, and their organs ripped from their abdomens. All just animals, dead animals. Their lives that had been so important before. Now useless, now nothing now. Just a heap of bloody regret. This is my future. This is the death of all. Thump. Darkness. When I awoke, I didn't smell food like I was used to. Melissa was already awake, crying. "What's the matter?" I asked her. "Why are you awake already?" "I didn't fall asleep this time," she whispered. They came and straight through the wall. They were so hideous, they. She started to sob. "Calm down, Melissa," I said. I went to her and put my arm around her. She latched onto me weakly. "Tell me what happened." "They don't have mouths, Tom," she cried. "They're not human, but the thumps come from their heads. We don't hear them with our ears, Tom. I never noticed before, but we hear them in our heads. Do you understand? They didn't bring food. They said that they'll keep bringing food from now on. But not today. They tried to tell me something else. But they had to stop thumping to talk to me. And once the thumping was gone, I didn't hear. I didn't want to. I begged them to stop, to bring it back. They stopped talking. They left. This is necessary." I held Melissa until she stopped crying and fell asleep. I thought about the changes we had now. I was trying to comfort her, but all I could think about was the flashes had stopped. I hadn't realized until that moment, because I was so used to the flashes accompanying the thumps that I had given myself flashes. But they weren't coming anymore. Not really. Something had changed since mealtime, and it made me almost uncomfortable. I could understand Melissa panicking when the thumping stopped now, though I didn't think I would have freaked out that badly. Melissa was still crying. "I'm sorry, Tom," she mumbled, pushing her face into my chest. I could feel her fear seeping through my shirt. I should have been able to talk to them, but the thumps. It's so strange when they're gone. I'm used to them now. I understood. I understood perfectly. We spent the rest of that day solemnly, talking not about what we would do when we got out, but how we possibly could get out. Things weren't normal. The thought that we might get out was beyond us now. We accepted that we could live like this, at least for a while. Then one day, maybe in a month or a year, we might use our forks and dig into our wrists. Do they have thumps in heaven or hell, or whatever lies beyond? We got food the next day. The thumps continued and the flashes remained silent. The food was better and life was good again. Melissa, though she was shaken, maybe it was seeing her captors that had her so on edge. Maybe they put something in her head. The flashes. I thought, is it possible they left my head and went to hers? Crazy, but crazier things had happened here. Every day, Melissa got more nervous, more agitated. I couldn't understand. I tried to talk to her about it, but she wouldn't answer my questions. She just looked at me and shook her head. "Nothing's wrong," she would say. "I'm just tired." This is denial. It happened on day 20. We fell asleep. We woke up and ate our food. We went about things as usual. I didn't know if I had. I would have done something. Suffering alone is 1,000 times worse than suffering with a friend. I was finishing my dessert in Melissa's, and Melissa, it quick as lightning. She stabbed herself hard in one wrist and the other. Then she shoved it in her mouth. She jammed it in her throat, pulling and pushing and grinding it in there, trying desperately to kill herself, to end it. One wrist was bright red, but it hadn't drawn blood. The other she'd stabbed harder, much harder, and it had holes in it. The holes were pretty deep. Leaking, pouring blood was trickling out of her mouth. And when I threw my food down and reached out to stop her, she kicked me in the chest. I fell against the wall and she just kept stabbing, cutting, choking with the fork. I didn't even realize I was screaming. The thumps had joined together by this point, making constant noise, and it was hard to hear over. Eventually she slowed and tried to force the fork down her throat. She gagged and choked, and I retched, but it didn't come out. I got to her and pushed her arms away and reached in, but it was far down at this point, far my only companion, dying. She died quickly between the blood and the choking. I don't know what killed her. I didn't care. I cried the rest of that day. I felt like doing the same thing. I thought maybe I would. The next day, maybe I would join her again. At least I wouldn't be alone. The next day, however, didn't work out like that. I waited and waited. Eventually, the blackout came. I was eager to kill myself after a delightful meal. I just hoped I didn't mess it up. I'd hate to be half dead on the floor, pissing and shitting myself, alone, for who knows how long. Fortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to mess it up. I woke up outside. It was dark. This wasn't right. No, I whispered. No one was in sight, but I could see the lights of a town in the distance. I was out. I'd made it out of my concrete prison. No, this is panic, this is change. I'm not ready for this. The thumps were gone, but things had changed. Adaptation, conditioning. The thumps were gone, the flashes were back. Evolution. I wasn't used to the silence, it was driving me mad. The flashes didn't help. I knew what would make the flashes go away. Though the thumps, they would keep the flashes at bay. Make me comfortable again, that was all I needed. And they'd been teaching me how to make the thumps. They'd been teaching me since day one. I just had to. I grimaced, not wanting to think about it, but I needed the thumps. What did I have to lose anyway? My only companion was gone. I stood and headed for the town in the distance. The third story. 1111. A young girl suffered from insomnia, and throughout the night she'd often wake up for no reason. One night she awoke, and in the daze of half sleep, she blinked in the darkness. Just for a second, she thought she saw a pair of reptilian eyes gazing at her and glowing red. She sat up and stared at them, quickly realizing that it was only her clock. It was 11:11. She sighed and tried to go back to sleep. The next night, she awoke and instantly looked at the clock. It was exactly 11:11. This began to repeat itself night after night, sometimes even during the day. For no reason whatsoever, she would stop whatever she happened to be doing and spin around to look at the nearest clock, always at 11 minutes past 11 o'clock. As her insomnia got worse, she thought she'd try some white noise to help her sleep. She turned on her clock radio to play music softly. It worked well, so she kept doing it for the next few nights. One night, she awoke with a terrible start, covered in cold sweat. Rather than being in a sleepy daze, She was completely awake now. The radio was still on, but instead of music, she heard static and a lot of erratic, clicking noises, breathing heavily. She stared at the glowing numbers. You know what time it was. Bang, her heart nearly jumped out of her chest. A door had just slammed to her right. Outside of the room, she heard a pair of humanly rapid footsteps running from the sound of the door slam, all the way around her, behind her head, and to her left. Another bang as a door was slammed shut. Her blood ran cold. Her bedroom was on the second story, and the wall behind her faced outside. There were no doors or floor there. Suddenly, she felt an urge to run. She didn't care where. She leapt from her bed and ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. In what felt like less than the blink of an eye, she ran through the hall, down the stairs, out the door, and to the end of the street. She doubled over, panting. After a moment, she looked back at her house, at her dark bedroom windows. He stared at it for a long time, when at last she began to feel calm again. She carefully walked back to the house. She left the front door ajar, and a lot of cold air had gotten in. She closed it behind her and turned on all the lights. As she made her way back to her bedroom, she hesitated the most as she turned on her own light. The room looked perfectly normal, but as soon as she heard the static coming from the radio, she rushed over and switched it off. After that night, she never listened to that radio again. The girl didn't sleep a wink for many nights. She told only a handful of people what had happened. Her parents, a few of her friends. The responses were all more or less the same. It was just a dream. It only felt real. You were so tired. Maybe you just imagined it. I believe you believe it happened. What you need to know is that this story is very true. To this day, the girl, well, she's a woman now, has never slept soundly. None of us know for sure what is so special about 11, but she did tell me this. Whenever that moment strikes the clock, she feels the same strange sensations. He says it's just like the feeling you get when you know you're being watched.